We did this about 10 years ago, and Mike had a presentation, and David Jackson followed him with a local presentation, and we're going to do it again because we haven't done it, and this is our mission, to preserve this history, to present it, to record it, and do whatever we can to promote keeping radio alive.
Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. This is our third presentation. First we did Bart with wireless, and I did a sort of a generic radio broadcasting history. And now we have Len Shapiro, who is the executive director of the Bay Area Radio Museum and Hall of Fame, which is our online, and it will be installed here eventually as soon as we do the work necessary to install it. I'm going to let Len introduce himself. His is about San Francisco specific radio history. Len.
Thank you, Mike. Thank you. My background, basically, real quickly, is I started in the South Bay Radio in 1966. I read meters at KSJO in San Jose. Then I went to work at KGNU in Santa Clara, did board op and production of sports and programming. And then from 1969 to 84, I did broadcasting remotes for KPEN in Los Altos, and not the KPN in San Francisco, unfortunately. But we did Santa Clara football, Bellarmine football, Notre Dame football, and we coordinated all those activities on the station, and I helped a little bit in sales. So that's my background, basically. And then from that point on, I was in PR and pizza, and did the PR for the Muhammad Ali fights in Northern California for the closed-circuit broadcast, and did that for about 5 years. And then I went to work for the Seals Hockey Club and got stuck in hockey the rest of the way. And basically got interested in radio back in 1966. I met some of the early broadcasters in San Jose, Lalo Caballero from Clock, Frank Darien, Earl Russell were down at KSJO, had nice talks with them, and were able to really get some background on that. The two stations that started in San Jose were KSJO, which turned into KLIV, one of our legendary stations, and KEN. KEN was started by George Snell and Floyd Farr. It was backed by George Mardekin, who had the Omar Khayyam restaurant in San Francisco. He kind of got that station going. KSJO did not have that money behind it, and it eventually failed and was sold off to Cal Radio in 1960, and that's when it started its rock and roll history, and we'll get into that in just a few minutes. But my first part of my presentation is a slideshow of the early years of radio in the Bay Area. It's called Voice Out of the Fog, and we have some of the early guys that are here. First, we start off with dovetailing into Bart's presentation of Francis McCarty. He demonstrated some of the early voice telephone work in 1905 at the Clift Hotel, and he made a significant contribution to radio at that point. He tried to sell stock in his company, got a lot of money, and probably, as Bart pointed out, some of those guys went to jail later. But when 6 months after he did this demonstration, we had the 1906 earthquake. He went over to Oakland to try to help in the relief program, and unfortunately his wagon, not motorcycle, don't want to be totally correct there, his wagon was spooked, the horses were spooked, he was thrown from the wagon, landed on his head and shoulder. Basically he never recovered, he died in 3 days. And I believe that is right. Here he is I think you saw that same picture earlier, and here's the articles covered up, but that's the article right there. The one that says inventor right on top is dead. That's the one that indicates he died in 3 days. The next part of the group is Earl Ennis. He was one of the earliest purveyors of radio parts in San Francisco. He had a partner in Ralph Hines, and they operated out of the Grant building, which I believe is still there. Yep, and he operated out of there. He conducted many experiments in both code and voice transmission, including outfitting an airplane over at Tanforan with a transmitter, and the guy sent Morse code while he was flying his aircraft, which is pretty amazing to do. Ennis' station was known as TG, the Grant store, and the station location was like PH, forerunner of today's PH, was housed in the Palace Hotel. And we have here a little action Okay, basically that translates to Joe Jeffries owes Jack Johnson a good deal of money that he has made a fortune through his relations with the colored champion. In fact, the Californian has cleaned up $62,000 since November 17th, all because of the Negro fighter insisted that the retired champion agree to meet him in a fistic contest in San Francisco. That was what that basically stated. The next is the real first big guys in Bay Area radio. Harrison Holloway. He was KFRC. He operated the station for many years before it was sold to General Tire and RKO. I'm sorry, it was sold to Donnelly. You'll find that many of these stations change hands every other week. And he sold it to Donnelly, and that's Harrison Holloway. He was an announcer, handled almost every chore at KFRC, from engineering to sales. He was a top 5 guy. The next guy, you can't see his last name on there, but it's Preston Allen. He is the founder of KLX in Oakland. He built the station on the top of the Tribune Tower. I don't know if you've looked up there. The station was up there in kind of a history sense in 1970s before it was taken down and put somewhere which we don't know where exactly it's located at this point. It's kind of lost. 910. That became KEWB in 1959, and then it became KNEW when Metro Media bought it. Again, stations changing hands left and right. But Preston Allen was an electronic genius. He had his transmitter was called the Powerful Katrinka, and he gave it a name. And that's the transmitter that he had. Now the next is the start of the really start of Bay Area radio and the syndicated version. This is Cecil and Sally. They started on KYA, then they went over to KPO later. It was the first syndicated program.
That's not a very big rowboat.
We're not going to cross the ocean. Get in while I hold it.
I don't think it'll even cross the lake.
Well, I've rented this boat for all day. Get in.
Cecil, does it leak?
I don't know. We'll find out later.
No, thanks. I don't care to get in the middle of the lake to find out if the boat leaks or not.
Sally, will you get in the boat before I have to pay another day's rent?
Well, it doesn't look very safe.
Oh, Sally, it's all right. You don't think the man would let us take out a leaky boat, do you?
Well, all right then. But if you drown me, I won't speak to you.
Here, hold a rope while I jump in.
Cecil, you're not going swimming.
I'm going to jump in the boat. Hold it. All right. That's good. Now I'll hold it for you. Come on, get in.
Well, help me, Cecil.
I can't help you and hold on to the pier at the same time. Jump in.
Oh, goodness, where shall I step?
Step on the back seat and be careful.
Hold my hand, Cecil.
I'm not an octopus. Get in before I pull you in. We want to get started.
All right. 1, 2, 3. Woo!
Hey, what do you want to do? Turn the boat over? I told you to step in. What'd you jump in for now?
What was his last name?
The actor was John Patric.
Oh, the character.
Character's name was Cecil and Sally. John Patric is, boy, when you read about him, he was pretty amazing. He was a Pulitzer Prize winner later, Tony Award for Tea House on the August Moon. He also wrote the screenplay for 3 Coins in a Fountain. So he ended up with a real successful career. Helen Troy was Sally, and she was a regular later on in her career in the Eddie Cantor Show out of Los Angeles. So he was really the first big syndicated show out of San Francisco in 1926. He wrote 1,000 scripts for that show. No. Next one is kind of in my light. It's Ernie Smith, who I call the godfather of sports broadcasting. He started on KYA. He was hired by William Randolph Hearst, and he was brought in because Hearst didn't know what to do with the station. He had the station, he bought it. He said, what am I going to do with it? He said, let's start broadcasting sports and news. So he started doing the broadcast. He did the big game in 1926. He did Cal games from that point on for about 10 years. Actually, he went back east and he worked with Ford Frick, who became commissioner of baseball, and he did the mutual radio broadcasts on the Mutual Network. So he was a pretty successful guy. He taught Jack London how to swim, Jack London's kids how to swim. He also set up all the swimming pools in San Francisco. That was his big claim to fame in San Francisco. All of them. He helped set them all up, the whole network of swimming pools in San Francisco. And he retired to his estate. He bought up a lot of the Jack London estate in the Valley of the Moon, and he was there until he died in 1955. And we went up there. We were lucky enough to get this tape, or actually transcription
and now
record.
Roos Brothers presents the Friday Night Quarterbacks, three of the top football experts on the Pacific Coast. Bill Leiser, Prescott Sullivan, and your host for the next 15 minutes full of football talk, Ernie Smith.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to another session of Friday Night Quarterbacks. This evening, we shall analyze the coming bowl games throughout the country. And by we, I refer as usual to the popular columnist of the San Francisco Examiner sports section, Prescott Sullivan, the editor of the San Francisco Chronicle Sporting Green, Bill Leiser, and myself. Now, before we begin, gentlemen, your picking average for last week was .000. And if you'd listened to me last week...
Yes, we know you picked Southern California.
Well, why not just say Merry Christmas?
Anyhow, that's enough for this year. Let's talk about next year.
Okay, on January 1st, 1943, at Miami, Florida, the Orange Bowl game, bringing together Alabama and Boston College. Alabama's record is 7 wins, 2 losses. Boston College won 8, lost 1. The odds are even. Mr. Sullivan?
Well, Boston College had one bad day this year. Fact is, it was worse than that. It was an extra special bad day. But then who hasn't had those kind of days? I have them all the time myself, and so I guess I can forgive Boston College for that 55-12 beating it took from Holy Cross on the occasion of its one bad day.
This was called the Friday Night Quarterback. This program was from 1942, and I said we were lucky enough to get up to Glen Ellen to see the Smith family. They had 5 discs of this broadcast, and this is 2 of them were put up on the Bay Area Radio Hall of Fame site under Ernie Smith, and it's amazing to have his work. He is the godfather of sports broadcasting. He did some of the initial, I guess you've heard about these things. They have the boards that the announcers use with the players, and somebody will be spotting for him and pointing at him. He started that. Also, he did the teletype for the recreations. He started recreations in some degree, even though Gordon McClendon did most of it later on. He started the setup and how to send it across a teletype to be rebroadcast at other stations around the United States for the San Francisco Seals baseball team.
Well, you know, one thing I liked about him is he spoke clearly and distinct. You could understand every word he said.
Well, most of those guys did, and of course, as you probably heard, that was a script. You know, that's not like today where Ray Ratto talks on the TV and goes crazy. This was all controlled by a script and timed. So it was 14:30 and had commercials. So the next one that we have here is One Man's Family. This is the start of the big production numbers out of San Francisco on Taylor Boulevard on the KPO.
One Man's Family is dedicated to the proposition that the American family is the bulwark of the American nation, and that so long as family life as we know it thrives, this America will be a good place in which to live. Our story deals with the family of Henry and Fanny Barber, they themselves, their children, and their grandchildren. You're not going to meet all the family today, because, my goodness, there are 12 grandchildren alone, including 1 set of triplets and 1 set of twins. But you are going to meet some of the more important members. And to begin with, here is Father, Henry Barber himself, a retired stock and bond broker, a man with a truly green thumb in his garden, and a great advocate of the American family way of life. Father Barber.
Yes. The good family, the happy child-parental relationship is the true solution to most of the problems in the world today. When homes are loose and slipshod and parents are selfish and inattentive, there you will find juvenile delinquency, bad citizenship, and bad parents for the next generation. If we have an inordinate divorce rate today, then follow the trail back and you will find the reason in the homes of the generation before. If I were to tell you...
Now, Henry, that will do.
Yeah? Oh, Fanny, I've just begun.
And it's all very good, but this is not the time and place to say it.
Well, as you may surmise, that was Fanny Barber, the mother of the 5 Barber children and the grandmother of the 12 members of the younger generation.
This was created in the studios of KPO from 1932, as you see there, till 1959. It was one of the best programs. And the later, Carlton Morrison is the creator. He was a dropout from Cal, and he went on later to write the I Love a Mystery series that also was a long-running program on the NBC network.
Who is this man over here in the corner with the glasses?
That's Carlton Morris.
He created the show.
He created the show. Next one is the Blue Monday Jamboree that was on KFRC from time to time, and also on KPO. One of the claims to fame on this one is the gentleman in the lower right-hand corner there. That's Tommy Harris. He went on to found the Tommy's Joint in San Francisco. Also, the lady is the First Lady of San Francisco Broadcasting, Edna Fisher. She was on many programs over the years on KPO, KGO, KFRC, you name it. She appeared on it playing the piano. And the gentleman on the top right-hand side, that is Meredith Wilson. He was the band leader at KFRC. He was the leader of the house band at KFRC for many, many years before he went off to Hollywood and New York City to be the big band guy. That's the Blue Monday Jamboree group.
Vocal group?
Both vocal and music.
Was Blue Monday like a musical program?
Yes, all musical. Yeah. Okay, the next is the Donnelly Mutual Network. Donnelly was from Los Angeles. He had KFI in Los Angeles, came up, and he bought KFRC when Holloway passed away. And he operated out of his Cadillac dealership on Van Ness. And you can see some of the picture there. You've got to get up here and really look at them closely. But the top right-hand group is the Happy-Go-Lucky Show that was on there for about 10 years with Edna Fisher again, and Moreau Upton, and of course Edna Fisher. She was, again, the lead piano player in that group. The bottom left is the Sam Show, and it ran out of his back studio. The studios were in the back, towards the back of that Donnelly building. And he serviced a 46 to 50 station network on the Mutual West Coast. And also one of the later shows we'll see is the Breakfast Club. He also had that out of that building. And we'll go right into the Breakfast Club.
Come on, get up, get out of the hay. The breakfast gang's here to brighten your day. We'll bring you laughter and music and song. Chase all your worries, you won't have them long. Wake up, stop yawning, we'll open your eyes. Have you been going with our exercise? Breakfast is ready, we'll start with a bang. And wish you good morning from the Breakfast Gang. Good morning, everybody, and welcome to the Breakfast Gang. With Amy, Julie Mason, Sweeney, and your host, Sal Bear. And Lyle Bardo and our Breakfast Gang band. Good morning, neighbors. It's 16 minutes past 7 o'clock. This is the Breakfast Gang. We're going to start everything this morning.
Well, that show was number one from 1948 to 1954 on KFRC in the morning. It passed Don McNeil's Breakfast Club out of Chicago, and it was Top Flight, brought in all the Top Flight groups to come in. Lyle Bardo was one of the great arrangers and band leaders on the West Coast, and he was there from 48 to 54 to run it. And I think the real downfall of the station was television. When television came on, they grabbed all the big acts. Did the Don Sherwood Show. Del Courtney had a band that was on TV on Channel 7, and that kind of depleted the acts and kind of took things away from KFRC. It went downhill, and then it was sold off to General Tire and RKO, and that's when it started its rock and roll history. And then one other gentleman at KFRC was Merv Griffin. He came up there and did the Merv Griffin show. He was a 19-year-old. He hopped on the SP commuter up to San Francisco and walked over to KFRC studios on Van Ness, auditioned for a music director with music director Meredith Wilson, got the job. Next thing you know, he's doing a show on the air, and then the next thing you know, he's traveling with Freddie Martin's band across the country. Merv Griffin, 1952.
Merv Griffin sings On the Street of Dreams, dreams broken into can be made like new on the street of dreams. Yes, friends, here is music for you with Lyle Bardo and his orchestra and featuring your favorite songs as sung by America's romantic young singing star, Merv Griffin. Poor, no one is poor, long as love is sure. On the street of dreams.
Hi there, neighbors. This is Merv. Well, from the looks of newspapers, the fashion question loomed up again, and the music publishers have moved right in on it, too. 'Cause here's a song that has the whole problem wrapped up in a nutshell. It's called The New Look.
Bare shoulder, hips padded, here they have taken off and there they've added. Matron and miss are certain of this, they've got to struggle through the new look. Low necklines, they've got 'em. What they snip off the top goes on the bottom. That's how they get the new silhouette. From chapeau down to shoe, the new look. Fashion decree.
And as we know, Merv went from that point to Freddie Martin, and then he went to television, and you know he created Wheel of Fortune and Jeopardy and made billions of dollars. And they all started as a choir boy in San Mateo and on KFRC in San Francisco. We got one little thing here with Doc Harold. Here is Doc Harold in the KQW's 25th anniversary, shortly before his death.
I'm gratified and happy to speak to you on this occasion. Station KQW has gone far beyond my dreams. I'm particularly proud that the dream we had for radio as an entertainment medium has materialized. Radio has indeed outgrown its infant clothes. I am happy to have been the first man to broadcast radio entertainment on a regular schedule.
The final segment is KSFO, and this is probably the, next to I Left My Heart in San Francisco, this is probably the theme song of Bay Area radio for the last 50 years. There's a big argument who actually wrote it. Aaron Edwards is reported to have written the words, and Johnny Mann the lyrics.
The sound of the city, the sounds that are heard in San Francisco are mixed with daylight's glimmering rays and moonbeams shimmering glow. When darkness settles on the city, homeward people on their way, chimes ringing softly in the stillness, fog creeping slowly across the bay. Hear the sound of the city, the sounds that are heard in San Francisco. On KSFO, KSFO, San Francisco.
Also, Aaron Edwards wrote the theme song for the Giants, Bye Bye Baby. When the Giants come to town, he also did that one. So that's kind of the slide presentation that I've got. The next I picked out, since we also have the Bay Area Radio Hall of Fame, we do a legendary station every year. I've picked out 6 stations that we've inducted into that. I'm going to sit down for this one. We start off with obviously the first one, KQW. It was the first radio station in the United States, but not the first licensed station, as Mike pointed out. KDKA in Pittsburgh was the first licensed station. As a matter of fact, KWG in Stockton was licensed before KQW. They were the fourth licensed station, and KQW was fifth. And the entertainment part that he was talking about there, he sent his wife down to Sherman and Clay down the street from the broadcast studio in San Jose. She would pick out music at Sherman and Clay, bring it back up to the station, and they would play it that night. And the next morning they'd get tons of calls, and that would determine which record stayed. So it was original, pick your radio songs that you wanted on the radio. I mean, it was just amazing that even back in those days, they would generate calls for the radio station to get requests. And it started way back in 1921. Yep, and that's when they started having that. Yep. In 1942, KQW was sold to CBS, and they moved their transmitter from Alviso up to Novato. And they've operated the station now. KCBS has operated under the CBS banner until recently, when they've had a merger with Intercom. Gosh, only knows what it's going to look like after the merger is finished. We'll find out probably in the next 6 months what it looks like. The next station is KPO, KMBC, KMBR. That was the Hale Brothers station. They wanted to promote their department store in downtown San Francisco. They put this transmitter on the top of their building on Market Street. And they eventually then moved to Taylor when the NBC took over. And they produced all the syndicated programs for the West Coast and the nation out of Taylor Boulevard, because Los Angeles and Hollywood had not really taken hold at that point. So it was all out of San Francisco. And a lot of people don't realize that it was one of the big production facilities in the United States, let alone the West Coast. Next one is KSFO. It started off as a CBS affiliate up until the time CBS purchased KCBS. After that point, it was held by Gene Autry, Golden West Broadcasting Company. He developed a tremendous staple of people, as you see here on that slide. Jim Lang, Don Sherwood, Jack Carney, Al Jasbo Collins. They all worked for Gene Autry at KSFO. They were also the big broadcaster for the Giants games, and I have a theory on why Don Sherwood became number one. He had been at KSFO since 1952, but he was good, but not great. But as soon as the Giants came on the air in 1958, people would go to bed listening to the Giant games. They'd wake up in the next morning, and guess what? They discovered Sherwood. And after that point, 60% to 70% of the radios in San Francisco were tuned to KSFO. And that's established his prominence in the marketplace. And unfortunately, he had a little problem with drinking, which kind of destroyed his career a little bit. He always had Carter B. Smith and Aaron Edwards there in the morning to help do the broadcast if he didn't show up that morning. The other station now, as we talked about, KFRC. That was Harrison Holloway was the founder of that station. It was sold to General Tire in 1966 by Don Lee. And as we know, in 1966, it became the Big 610 and really changed the broadcasting world. It was programmed by Bill Drake and Gene Chenault. They made that tight format, 30-record playlist, made it really hum. And it was the first station in the Bay Area and actually the West Coast that had 1 million cum, meaning 1 million different people listened to it during the course of a week. It was number one in Stockton, it was number one in Modesto, it was number one in Sacramento, number one in San Jose, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So it really did it. And of course, the lead guy who came in a little bit later after they started was Dr. Don Rose. He brought it to another level and did very well there and really kept KFRC in line for many, many years. It was a number one dollar producer for many years. I mean, just tremendous dollars went through that station for General Tire. Next station is KPEN. It's really the first FM station that dominated the market, developed by James Gabbert and Gary Gilo. It was multiplex stereo. It went on the air in 1958. They got the stereo portion going about 1960. And some of the programs, Excursions in Stereo, got you to well, my parents listened to it every night, and the train from Tehachapi would go through our living room every night. You know, one speaker from left to right or right to left. It was great. And then Gary Gilo would, California Zephyr, would go through. And then you had the Anything Goes with Gary Gilo and Gabbert both doing that show. They would play all types of show tunes, and Broadway and classical music would also be on the station. And it was a powerhouse for many years and set the trend for FM. It basically saved FM radio. I mean, FM was just in the doldrums. Yeah. In 1947, the station that they took over, KLX, had turned their license back to the FCC, and they wanted an AM station to start with. But then when Gabbert went to the FCC, they told him, geez, we've got all these FM channels that are open. Why don't you try an FM station? And that's the start. He took over the KLX 101 frequency and went from there. The last station, KGO, I think Art left. Did Art leave? He left? Yeah. KGO was in the doldrums, too. It was not doing much. It was started by General Electric. You can see the building in Oakland. It was over in the Oakland area there by the estuary in 1923, and operated just kind of in the background, just doing religious programming, agricultural programming, and some music programming. And then when ABC took over and developed the all-news format, that's when that station went on a rampage. It was #1 for 25 years, and now it's being destroyed by Cumulus, which is unfortunate. That was a great station. Yeah, Ira Blue, Jim Dunbar and Ted Wygant in the morning. I mean, you had the great crews, great outside reporters, Peter Cleveland, etc. were doing outside reporting. And then the all-night, you're liberal. So that's the stations I kind of picked. Last year we had KLIV, was our station of the year out of San Jose. And again, that station is credited basically with community service functions over the years in the South Bay, and also starting the surf craze in 1964 by bringing the Beach Boys up from Southern California, really promoting them. Disc jockey Jack Hayes and Larry Mitchell did concerts at Santa Clara Fairgrounds, the Cow Palace, etc., and it really developed that station into a major station for years and years and years. Well, KEWB was 910. Right. Yep. So we have, those are the key stations that we're figuring on. You heard all about some of the personalities. We talked about Don Sherwood, Dr. Don Rose. They're also in the Bay Area Radio Hall of Fame. And when we have a room upstairs, we'll have some other displays about these guys as years to come. Because believe me, I got 500 tapes sitting in my house. I've got record surveys. I've got all the stuff that we need to make this a great museum when it gets put up on the upper floor. So thank you very much. That's my presentation.